Hello, it's Levi, Morgan McAllister. Levi as in the great Leviathan, you know? Morgan as in by the sea, which is what it means in Scotland. McAllister is in Scotland. Okay. I apologize for all of that. I've got an acquaintance on Instagram named Tim Barron. His handle is Tim Barron Art. The stuff that's most fascinating to me is probably his work in the skate industry. He started doing these little process pieces on Instagram, and I've been inspired by them and decided that I was gonna just experiment with this instead. I want to talk about writer's block. Sometimes writer's block is not just not having any words to say. Sometimes it's just having all of the wrong words. And I've gotten to a place where I can write an entire page and look at it and decide these are all a bunch of nothing words for no one. Maybe they're pretty, maybe they're big, maybe they're linguistically intelligent, maybe they rhyme a lot, maybe it's one long iteration that goes on for 10 pages. But if it's not accomplishing what the goal is, they are nothing words. I thought of it this morning while I was working on a new piece that I'm very excited to put out. I'm not going to tell you much about it, save the person I am collaborating with. His name is Justin Lauer. He is an illustrator, and as you will see soon enough, an animator who's amazing at what he does. He's done a bunch of legwork on the visual side, and now it's my turn to complement all of that with words. What I keep on finding myself running up against, as I said, are nothing words that look a lot like what I will call wordplay. And I love wordplay, and I love lyricists who are good at it, but I do think that there's a balance between wordplay and creating an empathetic something that a listener can participate in. So what I mean by that is that I will sit down and find all of the coolest stuff, and it'll fit perfectly with the tempo that, by the way, doesn't even exist yet and will change when an actual musician comes in to tell me, hey, we can't do anything that way, so you got to rearrange all of this regardless. No one can do anything with this other than maybe, if they decide I'm good, look at me and say, that's observable, that guy's good. But there's nothing invitational or participatory to the words that I have found thus far, and so I know that I need to go back and find those words in order for this thing to have any sense of impact or legacy whatsoever. I can go so far down that wordplay rabbit hole that I get lost there, and it sparked a memory. 3 years ago, I was writing a feature for my friend Cam Smith. He has a project called Hotel Books, and the record that came out was called Run Wild, Stay Alive, and we collaborated on a song together called Friendly Crossfire. And I wrote this lesson that I'm talking about into the very first line of that verse that ended up being the final because I ran into the same exact thing there. And here's what it said. I spoke in the tongues of angels, but every floral arrangement still didn't turn human beings back into ideologies. So I wanted to create something, comprehensive and understandable and empathetic, and something that would lead to more participation with me than just marveling at me. Even though that'd be wonderful for my ego, I want people to be able to move out of thinking about something intellectually inside of their head and moving further down into their heart where they are able to feel and emote and be in that place with me as a part of the puzzle, if you will, which is often the way that I think about writing as a big thing that, especially at the end, you mean I found all of these pieces that my dog picked up and that my nephews came over and shoved deep down into the carpet, and all of a sudden this thing actually looks like something? It's mind-blowing to me because I am always sure. I hate puzzles. I've heard I don't know who the author is, but I heard an author, or I read an author talk about her experience as a writer, and she said, I hate writing and I love having written, which is very much the way that I feel about writing and about puzzles. I wish that I was one of those guys who was like, the joy is in the process. in order to complete that puzzle, I know that it needs to be something that all of these characters, all of these listeners, all of these people who might at some point hear this thing that I've decided we're going to put out into the world can enter into and be a part of. I have an example of a person who I think has done this well and then not so well. His name is Eminem. Maybe you've heard of him. Marshall Mathers, the real Slim Shady, which was the first song that I heard of his in... I had to have been 9 or 10, right? That record came out in 2000. And so I was a kid. I remember perfectly. I was walking into a boring clothing store with my mom. The real Slim Shady was playing on the speakers in this store. And that was probably the time that my mom decided, you're never going to listen to this again. And it was right around, ironically, the same time that I decided I'm only ever going to listen to this forever. In my mind, Eminem was a storyteller first and foremost. I think that he is the best, hands down, the GOAT guy linguistically. I still loved the way, what I fell in love with was not his wordplay, but the way that he invited me to enter into whatever story, to the degree that anyone was ever able to enter into his stories. That's not the point. This isn't a moral anything, okay? I've heard a lot of people over the years say, like, oh, Eminem isn't the rapper that he used to be. And what they mean by that is negative, but I say I agree. He's a better rapper than he ever used to be. I just think that the dude gets more and more amazing all the time. My friend Craig Gross took me to see him twice last year, and I never thought I would see him in my life. So it was like a dream come true, and then it came true again. And it was incredible, and I lost my mind, and I rapped every single word, and it was the best. What I think, though, is that there's a good balance between wordplay and storytelling, and I think that Eminem started to get so fascinated with being the GOAT and so fascinated with his wordplay that he went so far in that direction that folks no longer had a narrative to enter into. So I think that the dude's only gotten better and more awe-inspiring and observable as the best, but I don't necessarily see him as the best storyteller or the best version of, his storytelling self that he used to be. So at any rate, wordplay can start to feel like a rabbit hole that I end up chasing in my first draft of almost everything. But as soon as I recognize it as only floral language and not something relatable, I know that it's time to go back and find the new pieces. So if the point is participation, which I think that it is, over and above observation, then for me, it's not only about finding words that are pretty or, visceral, but finding the right words and putting them together in such a way that the folks listening are able to dive on in with me. And I think that it is this idea that I have always had inside, this sort of cultivating a togetherness. I found, actually I was reading back through the correspondence commentary recently, and I wrote the words in there that said, "You Are Not Alone" has been the anthem since the beginning. If there's a thing that Levi, the poet, for my artwork, or Levi the writer, like I just launched that website, levithewriter.com, and it's for client work, whether that's, a small business or another artist who's looking to collaborate on some lyrics, or release an album or do a campaign or whatever. I want to create something that is participatory. I want to be able to offer somebody something that they can step inside of as a lived experience, and not just observe through a magnifying glass, if that makes sense. And with that lip smack, with that tisk, I'm going to conclude this video. I hope that you have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.